Hi and welcome back to DJ Fonts Tutorials. I've been away for a while from the tutorial scene, but you'll find me back with several tutorials a week for the next few weeks. One of the first things I want to talk to you about is some of the new features in the juicer, and that includes the new set of plugins for DJ Fonts, which enhance the abilities for formatting text within the program. Today we're going to be looking at the Rotator plugin and some of the creative ways you can use this plugin within the juicer to both improve your workflow and your text design. Now, as you can see, after you've installed your DJ Fonts plugins, they appear over here under the Format Text panel. At least these three do. The Rotate, Power Scale, and Jumble plugins. And for the Rotation plugin, we call it the Rotator, it's as simple as just entering a value in the angle entry box here. The Rotator plugin is a no-brainer for anybody who doesn't use Photoshop or isn't comfortable with Photoshop and wants to keep their workflow within the juicer. But even for people who use Photoshop, it can be a way to increase productivity by working faster and doing more of the work in the juicer, where you can save your designs as layouts and come back and change fonts and make scaling changes without losing quality. But we'll go into that a little bit more as I look at the three creative ways to use the Rotator within the juicer. As I've mentioned in some of my previous tutorials, one way to add fun and youth to a logo or a title is to add some action and implied movement to your logo by rotating the letters. Now that's just gotten way easier because you can now do it in the juicer. Previously you would have had to output this text layout to a layered PSD with each character on a separate layer, go into Photoshop, rotate each letter, and play with it, and if you scaled it up too much or too little or didn't do it the right size, you'd have to come back into the juicer and output a new render and so on. So now you can do it right here within the juicer. I've got this basic layout for World Youth Day that I'm going to add some rotation and some fun to. Now there's a feature that's been added to the juicer that I'll go into in a later tutorial, but it's been there for a little while, and that's you can now add an image to your canvas background. If you come over here to the background color drop down and go to the very bottom, choose the background options. You can choose a file to load into your background, and I've got an image of the earth that I want my logo to be centered on, and we have a number of options here. I'm just going to choose to auto fit it to the canvas so that I can see how it's going to fit on this globe. I'm going to apply it. Now this gives me a better idea of how my text is going to fit. I'm actually going to do the compositing of that in Photoshop, but this gives me a good reference for how my text will look in terms of coloring and the rotation that I'm going to do. Now to start, I'm going to get rid of some of these sidebars so that I can see my text better, and I'm going to start going in and rotating the letters. So there's not really any formula. I'm just going to start selecting letters, and I'm going to come over here to the rotate box, and I'm just going to drag and start rotating some of these letters. And as you can see, when you start rotating, your letter spacing is going to get a little off, and you're going to have to go in and fine-tune that, but that's easy enough to do with kerning. So I'm just going to go back and forth on some of these, angle them opposite to one another, and then I'm going to come in and do some kerning in between the letters, a little bit of overlap just to keep it all tight. And I'm also going to adjust the baseline a little bit. You don't have to do that, but I find it helps add a little bit to the design. So I'm just selecting each of these letters and shifting the baseline up or down. So I've added rotation to that. Here, I'm going to start doing that. Come over here to the angle, drag, and one thing I've found is you really don't want to change your angle too much more than about 15 degrees, because then it starts getting unreadable and stands out too much. Now that there's always exceptions to the rule. For some special effects you'll want to rotate way more, but as a rule of thumb, 15 degrees left or right is going to work the best. And again, I'm coming in here and kerning in between the letters. And I'm going to just adjust the baseline of a few of these a little bit to make the text a little bit more readable, add a little bit more fun to the layout. There's no set formula for this, as I've said before. It's completely up to you how you want it to look. The main thing is just to attain a balance that looks good and keeps that fun aspect. And there's no reason you have to rotate every letter. Sometimes, like this middle A, it helps balance the word to keep something straight. And I'm just going to adjust the leading a little bit here. So now I've got my logo with rotated letters. It was easy to do. I did it in about 5 minutes. I can output that whole logo as one PNG file for my video, or I can take it into Photoshop and further composite it with the background image. Okay, so you've created a logo layout that you really like in the juicer. You've spent some time using the rotator and the other text controls to get the look you want. Here is the reason that you're going to want to use plugins like the rotator and PowerScale and Jumble within the juicer instead of going to Photoshop. With this new feature that you'll find under the Edit Layout tab, you can save your current layout. So that means it'll save the DJ font that you're using, it'll save the exact settings, and bring it back up onto your screen with the canvas and output settings that you had selected for it. So to do that, you come over here under the output, way under at the bottom of this Edit Layout tab, there's a command called Save as New Layout. And what that allows you to do is save your text layout. You give it a name, so we'll call this World Youth Day, and you can give it keywords, you can leave a comment, you can get rid of hidden layers, etc. And then you click Save, and it will show up when you go to open a layout if you click this button here. I'll go into the Save as New Layout feature in another tutorial, but because of that save layout feature, you can now take this text and come back to it in 2 months and use it for a different logo, or change the color because the client wants orange instead of yellow, and you don't have to recreate everything back in the juicer. Let's say you're using it for a web page and then they decide they want t-shirts. Well, you can just come back in and change your output settings, scale it up, render it out again, and you've got a higher resolution version. So Save as New Layout is a perfect complement, and that's part of the regular features of the juicer now. That's a perfect complement to these new plugins. Okay, so you've seen how to use the Rotator plugin to create a fun, youthful look, but you can also use it to create visual metaphors just by rotating one or more letters in your layout. For this project, I'm going to take this font that I created using the corporate Chrome font. It's called Fall Golden, and I'm going to use it on a 4x6 postcard for a fall sales event for a clothing store. So first of all, I'm just going to type in my text, the word fall, and I'm going to scale it up quite large because it's the main element on my postcard. I'm going to track it down, and then I'm also going to load in a background image, just as I did in the last project. It's a scene of beach rocks, and I'm going to use the actual size because I've already scaled it to the right size, preview it, and apply it. Now what I want to achieve with this is I want the letters to look like they're falling leaves. So they're coming in from the top and falling onto the beach just like the leaves that are already here. And to do that, I'm going to start rotating the letters. Just going to kind of go back and forth with a slight angle. I don't want anything too drastic. Okay, and then I'm going to adjust the baseline so that some of them are further down than others. So this one I'm going to shift up, and I'm going to shift my margin a little bit so it's in from the edge. And my A I'm going to keep where it is, but I'm going to kern the two letters a little closer. My L I want to move up close to where the F is, and the L I want to move all the way to the top as if it's falling down from the sky. Now, because I've moved these letters closer together using the kerning, they're not big enough anymore, so I'm just going to scale that up. And this is something that makes it easier to use the juicer because I might not have realized that I needed to render those larger if I was setting up this layout in the juicer and exporting it to Photoshop. But because I'm right here in the juicer, I can just do that very easily. Okay, so now my letters look like they're falling down on the beach from the sky, and your customer links them automatically with those golden leaves that are already on the beach, and you've got a visual metaphor happening with your text. Now, as you'll see in this final layout in Photoshop, I also rendered out the word savings using the same font, but just turning that texture off, that texture layer, and rendered it out to use on the front of the postcard as well. And I added a bit of a drop shadow to the letters so that they stand out a bit more. So as you can see, you can create a pretty cool visual metaphor just using a little bit of rotation on the letters to add that extra touch. Okay, so I'm designing a postcard for a Earth Day celebration, and I found the perfect image that I want. It's got the globe and some really cool green lines that look like a wave, and I've actually chosen a digital juice font that I want to use with this. Now I want it to go with the poster, but I want it to stand out and be special. And I think one of the ways I'm going to be able to do that is to have my text follow this curve across the front of this postcard. And to do that, I'm going to have to use the Rotator plugin. Now I'm still in the designing stages of this, so I'm not sure what coloring I'm going to end up with, whether I'm going to keep the same texture. So because I can do this in the juicer, I'm going to save it as a layout, and then I can test out a number of different options. Now I'll admit that the process of doing this rotation is going to be a lot faster if I do it in Photoshop. However, if I do that, then I don't have the option of changing my texture and coloring and deciding what scale I want my layout to be. So I'm going to do it here in the juicer, and I'm going to show you some of the ways you can do that. I think for this procedure, I'm going to do it a letter at a time. So I'm just going to type in the words Earth Day and match them to the curve. I'm going to rotate this letter so that it's just following that line, and I'm going to increase the font size a little bit. And for each letter, I'm going to scale down slightly so that I end up with a smaller typeface at the top. That's going to be a kind of a neat effect, as if it's going into the distance. So I'm going to scale this down a little bit. And the main thing for this is you're going to be going back and forth between baseline and kerning between letters. The kerning is going to bring it over closer to the letter, but it's going to make it look like it's higher, so you're going to have to go back and forth a little bit between these to get the letters in the right place. And then of course rotate to follow the line. And a little bit of overlap is fine. In my world, it's preferred. Not everybody likes to overlap letters as much as I do, but it's my design, so that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so next letter is an R. And I'm going to shift kerning. That's going to be too close, because as I drop the baseline, it's going to get closer to the A. And I need to rotate that just a little bit more. I need to change the size, drop it down another 15 to 20 points, and then it needs to go back up slightly. Okay. Now I'm not going to bore you with doing this whole phrase here, but once you get the idea of how this is done, you should be able to do it pretty quickly yourself. It just takes a little patience, and it'll take me 10 or 15 minutes, which is too long to show you in a tutorial. But for creating this design, it really isn't that long, because it's something that you can save and keep. Again, I'm going to select the T and scale it down a little bit. And I'm going to keep doing that for the other letters. So now I'm almost finished. I'm on my last letter, and I'm just going to scale it down slightly. Not as I get higher on this curve, I'm not scaling as much because I don't want the difference to be as much at this top end. And we've got our design. Now I'm going to come back over here to the settings panel to edit layout and say save as a new layout. And that will allow me, I'm not going to do it right now because I've already saved it, but that will allow me to come in here and bring this back in at a later date once I've tried out this look in my project and change the texture that's in here. Currently what's in there is some flowers that I've colorized to the same green. So let's say I turn off the colorize and raise the opacity. And we've got a much brighter, friendlier look. Or maybe I just want something simple with no texture. Then I've got just plain glassy looking green. Or maybe I want to change the background color to blue instead of green. These are all, the kinds of options that you might want to test out. And because I can load in this background image, I can see how they look against it. And, I can go into Photoshop, change this background image, bring it back in with the different colors, and still use the same layout of my text. So it makes it pretty flexible to be able to save the layout and to be able to use rotation within the juicer. There's certainly a place for it, especially for people who don't have Photoshop or who aren't very comfortable using Photoshop. But even for people who do, I think this is something that will save you time in the long run. So that's my Rotator tutorial. I'll be back soon with more tutorials. This is Jackie Dawson. See you next time.